Yep. So, good morning, everybody, and welcome to this our cabinet meeting on Friday, atypically on a Friday, Friday the 15th of November. We are being broadcast live on YouTube, so please do not swear. Apologies for absence is the first thing that we've got on our agenda, and we've got apologies from Councillor Bauman, Lulu Bauman, who's away today. And I think we should also note the apologies of which select committee chairs are missing. Jonathan Glenn. Jonathan Glenn's on holiday as well. Yeah. And Rob McCatter as well. Yeah. So Rob and Jonathan aren't here. We've got minutes of the previous meeting. They are on pages 5 to 48 of your agenda. Can I check that everyone's happy with those, please? All agreed? No amendments needed? That's all good. So, Chairman's announcements. So I've got a few this time around. Clearly, the big issue for us in the last few weeks has been the national budget, and there are a number of different issues that have affected us as a consequence of that. I think, if I'm honest with you, there in many ways leaves us with more questions than we have answers at the minute. And so we are awaiting the local government settlement, which we understand we'll have more detail of in the next couple of weeks, and then some certainty around, as usual, probably around Christmas Eve. So it's a busy Christmas and New Year for our finance team as a consequence of it always coming out at that time of year. I've said elsewhere that the budget was not of much help to us here in Hampshire. It has had a significant impact upon our local employers. It's also had a significant and really worrying impact on our local family farms, and that I know is something that is of real concern to those of us who represent divisions that are in the rural areas of the county. More importantly, I think one of the challenges that we have is the impact of the national insurance rise on the people who carry out work alongside us. So our partners and our contractors now face even greater cost pressures, and that inevitably will be something that weighs upon us as we look at the way in which we interact with them and the charges that they pass on to us. We already, as you can see from the reports that we have in front of us today, have significant pressures, and there's very little in the budget that helped us at all. Extra money for special educational needs is welcome, as is the commitment from the government that they will reimburse us for the national insurance cost rise that we ourselves face. But that, frankly, is just a drop in the ocean. And what was really disappointing about the situation was that there's been no announcement around any kind of change to the way in which we can operate, the unring fencing of funds, the ability to means test some of the things that we do, the change in the way in which we operate, and the ability to charge for some services, all of which would transform the way in which we operate, would enable us to be far more innovative, would enable us to look at our finances in a very different way, and quite frankly have a much greater chance of becoming sustainable than the position in which we currently find ourselves. The other worrying aspect is that the way in which local government finance is to be reviewed, and the government have been quite clear that they will use deprivation indices as the main driver for that change, and that inevitably means that we are likely to lose money in favour of both inner city and northern areas, with very little understanding of the challenges we have for rurality, or the fact that whilst we are a large, well-run and well-performing council, we still have areas of significant deprivation that need assistance directly. And essentially, what the government are doing is proposing to take money away from deprived areas in Hampshire to give them to deprived areas elsewhere, which does us no help whatsoever. There are a couple of good pieces of news, however. It was really good news for Gosport and Test Valley in the sense that the levelling up funding that has been granted to Andover and to Gosport has been confirmed. That was a worry that that might be taken away. And similarly, that the free ports will be retained and aligned with the government's new industrial strategy. And that's something that we spent some time talking about at the Prosperity Partnership Board yesterday, which was of use. The other part that the other piece of work that we've been doing that links to the budget is around devolution. And our conversations with our neighbours and partners on the South Coast and on the Isle of Wight have continued. Carolyn and I had a really positive meeting with the leaders and chief executives of the unitary councils on Wednesday, and that went really well. We are working towards understanding what we might ask of government from a devolution deal. The part of the announcement in the budget that worries me most is that it would appear that alongside devolution, the government are now talking about local government reform. And as we all know from any experience that you have with politicians talking about the boundaries of councils, you can go into a swamp of people arguing for a long time if you go down that route. Two-tier councils, the two-tier system in Hampshire of districts and boroughs providing some services and the county providing others works really well. And I see no reason why we would want to change it, and it would work just as well under a combined authority relationship as it would now. So I think it's something that we really need to look very carefully at, because I see no reason for us to be changing that as we go along. Other things that we've been up to, Carolyn and Jan and I attended the County Council's Network Conference earlier this week. That was really interesting. There was a lot of good stuff for us to take away from there. If again, I'm honest with the various speakers on behalf of the government that were there, they gave us more questions than they gave us answers, and they sometimes contradicted one another. But thus is the way of government at the minute, and that was something that was just helpful to understand, even if it didn't give us any of the answers that we wanted. But some really good ideas, some really good presentations around innovation in other councils. It gave us ideas of where we can go and look at some of our colleagues and partners in that network to find out and learn from them, find out what they're doing. So some good work for us to do carrying forward that also feeds into our finances. And, just feeds into that piece of work that we are all doing, in that we are looking at every single thing that we do to find better ways of doing things for less money. As a consequence of being away, unfortunately, the timing of the conference meant that I wasn't available, nor Jan or Carolyn, to take part in the Staff Remembrance Day event on Monday. So my thanks to Keith, our chairman, for taking part in that in our absence, and for laying the wreath as a symbol of our respect and immense gratitude to Hampshire's armed forces, past and present. Did you want, Dan, do you want to talk about the LGA conference that you went to, with any kind of reflections there?
No, thank you, Nick. I think that it was also a very useful conference in that we were looking for government policy and clarity around that. I think there was quite a bit of talk around devolution, but very little detail. So probably a similar message to the CCN conference, but no further work. But again, innovation and ideas that we all share. So it's a very valuable experience. Thank you.
That's unfortunately that coincided with half term, so that's why I wasn't around for that. So as you'll know, I also like to just take a few moments to highlight some of the really good work we're doing. Inevitably at each of these meetings, both at council and in cabinet, we find ourselves talking about the finances, and it's very easy to talk about all of those challenges and forget that actually there's some really excellent work going on amongst our staff, amongst the teams that support the most vulnerable people in Hampshire and support the core purpose that we have to provide those services. So a couple of examples today. One is the HIAS Special Educational Needs and Inclusion Team. So the Hampshire Improvement and Advisory Service Special Educational Needs and Inclusion Team work with our schools to embed a consistent standard of ordinarily available provision in all schools across the country, across the county. This is the support that our children and young people with special educational needs should be able to access at all times and without needing to have an education, health and care plan. The team are doing an absolutely brilliant job at this, securing 100% positive feedback to the advice and guidance that they provide our schools through their support. This is such important work, as it means that more children with special educational needs can have their needs met in their local school without the need to attend specialist provision. In spite of the many challenges that working in the area presents, the team continue to gain an increasingly strong reputation for their high quality support. So our thanks to them for all of the work that they are doing. And the other thing that we wanted to highlight was that a piece around the work that we're doing around flooding. And interestingly, I think we should do this more often. The reason being that as soon as we said let's talk about flooding at the Cabinet meeting, it hasn't rained since. Over the last 12 months, we have seen a record number of storms, above average rainfall and significant flooding affecting communities across Hampshire. Luckily enough, not in the last 3 weeks. This trend towards wetter winters and more intense summer thunderstorms will only continue as the climate changes. The County Council's Flood and Water Management team has therefore developed a new community toolkit to assist people across Hampshire to prepare for flooding. The toolkit is designed to provide information on the different types of flooding, who it should be reported to, and clarification on roles and responsibilities. It also identifies how individuals can take action to understand their flood risk and what they can do to make themselves more resilient. Our Flood and Water Management team hopes that the toolkit will help to raise awareness of flooding and assist communities to access advice and support in advance of what may be another wet winter period. The toolkit is available to view on the County Council's website under the flooding web pages. So a really good piece of work there, something that I started when I was in Universal Services prior to becoming leader, and know that Kirsty and Lulu have continued and have done some excellent work around that. So our thanks to them and to the team that do that. It looks like next week is going to be cold, not wet, but I'm sure it'll rain soon because sadly, as Malcolm will no doubt be at the forefront of reminding us, the impact of climate change means that this is not something that's going to go away, and it's going to be something that continues to affect us all. So the other thing I just wanted to highlight was that at the decision day earlier this month, of my decision day earlier this month, I was really pleased that we talked about a rail station interchange improvement plan for Hampshire. This is something unique and something quite innovative that we are doing. We've developed it, the County Council has developed it together with South West Railway and other local stakeholders. The plan assesses all of the 48 stations in Hampshire for things like their levels of accessibility for pedestrians, cyclists, onward connections for other modes of transport, particularly buses and taxis, planned development in the area, and provision for car and cycle parking. Too often our stations have lacked connectivity with the rest of the area around them, and they are an integral and important part of our public transport landscape and our public transport connectivity. And so having a plan for them that enables us to think about how we can use money in the future from developers or from government grants to improve accessibility at the interchanges is a really important piece of work. It doesn't mean that we can do things straight away. It does mean that we have a plan to do so. We are the first county in the country to have done that, and it's been an excellent piece of work. So thanks to everybody who put the plan together, particularly Andrew Wilson and his team, because they've done some really excellent work. Thanks too to everyone from South West Railway and the stakeholders who worked to develop the plan, the community rail partnerships, district councils and the national park authorities, all of whom had input into it. The Hampshire Cultural Trust, on the 7th of November, the Hampshire Cultural Trust celebrated its 10th anniversary at Milestones Museum in Basingstoke. Zoe was there. Do you want to say a couple of words about it? Was it?
Yeah, thank you, Nick. It was a fantastic venue. I will say my first time visiting Milestones, so it was lovely to be there. But it was a really poignant celebration of both the successes over the last 10 years of how we've transitioned with Hampshire Cultural Trust and them becoming more independent in their arts and culture and in supporting us and the partnership we have. So I just want to thank Paul and his team at Hampshire Cultural Trust, because it was a fantastic event with some really fantastic performers. We had 2 performers, local performers, so it just goes to show the talent we have here in Hampshire as well. Thank you.
Thanks. I think the other sort of interesting sort of related issue was that Paul and I attended a meeting of the Gosport Regeneration Steering Group, and the plans in Gosport using some of that levelling up funding that we were talking about earlier are really interesting in the respect of how they are using culture and arts as a driver for regeneration in Gosport, and it was good to be there and support that as well. So we look forward to continuing to work in partnership with the Trust. They're doing some great work. Times have been tough, but they have worked with us really well over finding ways by which we equally can make further savings in the way that we work together. And they continue to provide inspirational cultural experiences for our residents and visitors and change lives through culture. Almost there. Final thing just to talk about is the Harold Hillier Gardens. So the leader of the council is the trustee of the Sir Harold Hillier Gardens. If you've not been there, go. It is the most beautiful place. And at this time of year, particularly with the late autumn colours, it's really lovely. The Sir Harold Hillier Gardens Arboretum Trust Board meeting will be on Monday the 25th of November. That's where we review the budgets for next year and the finances for this, amongst other things. They equally have a real challenge because, of course, being slightly outside of the county council family as an arm's length body, the national insurance increase impacts them. The one thing I would suggest, though, is that from the 28th of November, if you can't get to see the autumn colours, do go and see the Christmas lights, because they have the light up trail around the gardens that lasts until the 1st of January. It is the most lovely thing to go and see. And we've been every year since they've been doing it. My advice to you is, if you've got little ones, go earlier in the evening. If you don't have little ones, go a bit later so that you're not quite so caught up with everybody charging around. And it says, for more information and to book tickets, visit the Light Up Trails website. So that's what you should do. You'll be very glad to know that's me done with the chairman's announcements. Deputations, we've got no deputations. Councillor Malcolm Wallace, so our colleague from the Green Party, would like to talk about items 7 and 8. Malcolm, what I'll do, come and we'll just do the economic strategy bit first, then come and sit at the table and we'll talk about those then, if that's okay. So the next item up is the economic strategy update and regional update, which are on pages 49 to 84, and Natalie and Gary are going to come and help us with those papers.
Thank you, Leader. Good morning, Cabinet. I promised Natalie I wouldn't do the usual thing, which is when I summarise a paper and then leave her with nothing to say. So you have before you the paper covering our updated economic strategy, which has been a huge undertaking over the last 6 months in terms of the transfer of post-LEP responsibilities and the requirements that have been afforded to us within government, but working really, really clearly in partnership with a range of partners across businesses, education, and the voluntary sector, as well as our local government colleagues. So I want to hand over to Natalie to introduce the report, and then would welcome any questions, Leader. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. This report seeks approval from Cabinet on the updated Hampshire Economic Strategy. It's been produced following the functions that transferred to the upper tier local authorities after the LEPs went on the 1st of April this year, and we were required to deliver either a new or an update economic strategy. As the county strategy was only about a year old at the time, we decided it was make far more sense to update that document rather than to prepare a new one. And it's been a really good opportunity to refresh it in a number of ways. Firstly, we've updated the economic data. We've changed things in recognition of new national policy. There's an alignment to New Hampshire County Council policy and strategy, so there's been a number of things that we've done subsequently, such as the LTP4 and the public health strategy. And we've put a real emphasis on what good growth means as well. So it's not just about growing the economy at any cost, it's about really understanding how we create that really sustainable economy for Hampshire. It's also a really good opportunity to highlight how Hampshire, with the right investment from government, can really play an important role in the government's growth agenda. But that investment from government is a really critical part, and we've tried to really build that narrative through the document. The strategy is a very high-level strategic document. So the piece of work we're now doing is to create an economy and growth plan that will sit under kind of priorities need to be in order for Hampshire's economy to grow. We will bring that plan back to Cabinet early in the new democratic year. So Cabinet's approval is sought to adopt this strategy, and I'll now hand over to you. Thank you.
Super. Thanks so much for that. So colleagues, any questions for Natalie and Zoe?
Thank you, Chair. First of all, thank you, Natalie and to Gary, for developing this strategy so quickly and the prosperity arrangements that we now have in place. It's certainly great to see, and it will stand us in good stead as we develop those strategies underneath it regarding regeneration and skills. With over 60,000 businesses and a 50 billion economy, we are a key asset, like you said, for the government's growth strategy. Natalie, what do you believe are our key opportunities if we were to get the right investment?
There's a number of opportunities open to us, particularly through a devolution deal, such as additional funding and powers as well for things like transport, education, particularly adult education, and economic development. And mainly that would be around increasing investment, but also giving us much more local control, which I think is really important. So we get to determine what the priorities are and where those investments go. But having kind of really clear, focused economic priorities means that actually we can add real value right now without needing to wait for a devolution deal. And the work we're doing with the Hampshire Prosperity Partnership Board to identify those priorities is the first kind of step in that. And a number of things are kind of already within our gift, really. So in terms of the things we're doing at the moment to have an impact, we have been working on business boot camps, which are delivering kind of really bespoke skills to the Hampshire economy. So we're looking at what businesses need, and then we're putting the right training in place to help them. We are having a much better join up between our businesses and our education. And when I speak to both sides of that grouping, they always complain that they haven't got enough interaction with the other, because actually they need that intelligence to be able to deliver the right skills. Through the skills partnership, which sits under the Prosperity Board, they've got a real opportunity now to be engaging with each other on a regular basis. We're supporting new clusters, and this really does help those key sectors in the county to get the right support they need and the access to the supply chains. And just last week, we launched a defence and security cluster. So there's some real kind of tangible work happening around our sectors at the moment. And we've introduced a number of new strategies which is having a direct impact. So things like the LTP4, which does underline the infrastructure we need for growth. So there's quite a lot that we're doing already, but a devolution deal would just add to that local control that we don't have at the moment.
Sorry, Liz?
Yeah. Sorry, thank you. Yeah, I think you've partially answered the question I was going to ask, but I'll ask it anyway, if that's all right. The government has taken away all the funding that used to go to the LEPs. How will that affect future development? And in a way, again, I think you've answered it, but how is the Hampshire Prosperity Board functioning without that sort of massive increase in funding?
It's very early to say at the moment. So obviously we're doing some work with the board to recognise what the impact of that loss of funding is. But it was only a relatively small amount anyway of core funding. There was never any kind of previous clarity around investment into economic development, so not a lot's changed in that position. One of the key benefits the board brings is that knowledge, that intelligence, but also their ability to lobby as a powerful voice. And we often find that actually key business people have a much better kind of voice and recognition with government than we do ourselves, particularly when they're making a really strong case around what infrastructure is needed. So one of the conversations we were having with the board yesterday was around the industrial strategy. and what response we need to be making to that really identifies what the key needs are for Hampshire. So again, it's how we harness that really valuable voice, and actually you can do a lot of that without direct funding. In order to be able to access the big pots of funding, we've got to be able to get in front of government and make that case. So that's one of the things the board can really help us with.
Thanks, Jan.
Yes, just really briefly, your report highlights the 166 neighbourhoods within Hampshire that are classed as deprived. How will this strategy help improve those areas of deprivation? Are you able to outline how that economic growth will help?
One of the key ways of being able to help deprived communities is around the skills agenda. So it's really about being able to equip people to be able to join in the economic prosperity. So the work we're doing with our education partners, both our formal kind of providers such as colleges and universities, partly through the Prosperity Board, but also actually just through day-to-day work, and also our private providers. But also as a council ourselves, we've actually got quite a large operational skills delivery for adult education, so through our boot camps, through other kind of training programs, direct training programs, and we've just received a large settlement from DWP as well, which is again about getting people into work. So there is a lot we can do around kind of getting people more active in the economy, but we need the right skills and training to be able to do that.
Thanks so much. Any other questions? Select committee chairs, any questions? No? Okay. In which case, the recommendations that we're considering are on page 49 in paragraphs 3 and 4. Any debate, any comment anyone would like to make? Yeah, Zoe.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's really just following on from the comments on skills and economy, and from someone that's from a division that is one of those neighbourhoods in Gosport. You know, I really endorse that, because that's really important. Knowledge can change someone's life dramatically, or even a small business. But I just want to say that it can be a win-win situation when we also talk about the green agenda. So this week I visited the Arc in Winchester, where I got to attend a drop-in event regarding retrofit and green skills boot camps. So we are talking about the skills of the future as well as looking at current skills. Even before the doors opened at 10 o'clock, we had 2 residents already walking in and inquiring. So before I left them in the morning, it was really, really positive. So, you know, there is some real positive impact regarding that skills agenda and boot camps. And in talking to some of the team there who were fantastic, they also talked to me about another scheme regarding Ukrainian medical practitioners, where they are looking at funding medical licenses so they can be licensed here in the UK, which obviously for us in supporting the Ukrainians with their own skills will also contribute to our own economy here in our community. So some fantastic work going on.
Super, thanks. Any other comments, everybody? No. Select committee chairs? No, all good. So I think the only thing I would say is I think it was really disappointing in the budget that we heard that the funding for the post-LEP arrangements is not continuing. That's something I think that we will need to take in our stride. We had a meeting of the Prosperity Partnership Board yesterday, which was really positive, I felt. We have a lot of really great people engaged, interested, with a really wide variety of backgrounds in place on that board. And it's something that is of credit to us as an organisation, and much more importantly, credit to us as a county. So finding a way by which we continue to do that good work, finding a way by which we begin to, we still use it to leverage the kind of interventions that we need, particularly around skills and training that impact our most deprived communities and improve the opportunities for those people, is vital. And so I'm absolutely committed that we continue to do that work, and we will find our way to do it. It will become easier, I suspect, if we go down the devolution route, but those decisions have yet to be made, and we need to talk further with our partners about them. But thank you, Natalie, in particular, for all the work you've done around that, because I think you've established a fantastic organisation of people who can support that. So We are we asked to approve the recommendations. All of those in favour? Agreed. Yeah. Super. Thanks very much. That's agreed. So on to the medium-term financial update. Thank you, Gary and Natalie, which I think Andy's going to present for us. Sorry, Andy, hang on 1 minute. Malcolm, do you want to come and sit at the table now as well? That would, so that you can be part of the conversation. I think that's probably the best point, rather than you jumping up and down afterwards. So, Andy, far away.
Okay, good morning, Leader and Cabinet. I'm just going to run through the MTFS. And Leader, you've already covered some of the really key points in your opening remarks. The MTFS covers a number of areas, so we call out the autumn statement. There's an update to the overall MTFS budget position, comment on DSG, we'll cover the business rates pool, it's got review of the capital programme reserves, and lastly, it finishes with the options for closing the budget gap. I think really importantly, right at the front of the report, we set out that we believe Hampshire's probably reached the stage where it cannot make sufficient revenue savings going forward to close the ongoing revenue gap, and particularly looks at 26-27 and the possibility of a Section 114, which on balance the report sets out is more likely than not. In terms of the key areas then, the autumn statement, I think it's fair to say we felt it was fairly disappointing from the County Council's perspective. In total, the government announced £1.3 billion worth of additional funding for local government, of which £600 million was for social care, and we believe our share of that will be £8.7 million. There were some notable omissions, so no mention of council tax flexibility and no mention of any increased flexibilities or changes to legislation, the things that you requested in your letter. The statement also set out, from our perspective, worryingly, a move to a deprivation-based approach to allocating funding, which, as we know, is not likely to be positive from our perspective. You've already mentioned the increase in national insurance, Leader. It should be cost neutral for Hampshire in terms of our direct employment costs, although we've not had details on the actual grant to be received. But worryingly, there's no new money set aside, as far as we can tell, for the consequential impact to our providers, particularly adult and children's social care. It was billed as a rescue package, but I think as we sit here, we've not seen it as such. In terms of the overall MTFS position, last update was £132 million gap back in November 23. This report sets out that the gross gap has now increased for 25-26 to 182.2 million and 266.4 million for 26-27. If we allow for the SP25 savings that you've already agreed, that will bring the recurring budget gap down for 25-26 to 116 million and for 26-27 185 million. And you won't be surprised that some of the key demand pressures still continue and form the bulk of some of those pressures that we face. So adults and children's social care and home to school transport. I'll just touch on DSG. The report sets that there was no update in the autumn statement on the statutory override, which is due to end in March 26. And by that date, we believe the deficit will be 296 million on the DSG high needs block. And again, the report is quite clear. It sets that if the expectation that Hampshire County Council picks up the deficit, then again, we'd be in 114 territory almost immediately. The other thing that's picked up in the report in paragraph 21 is Rob's recommendation that we join the Hampshire business rates pool. The business rates pool will be made up of Hampshire, East Hampshire, Gosport, Havant, Test Valley and Winchester. It's for 25-26 and we foresee a potential benefit to the county of £4 million to the business rate pool. The report then goes to the review of capital and reserves. So from capital, you'll see we've released £38 million from the capital programme. And then for reserves, 25 million from directorate reserves freed up, 25 million from cost of change, 20 million from insurance, and in total we've released 108 million, of which 67 we've moved across to the budget bridging reserve to support the overall budget. In terms of options for closing the gap, I think at the start of the report we set out that 116 million could be closed by a combination of a full draw from the budget bridging reserve of 92 million, which would leave additional savings to find of 24 million. And the report is clear that through the legal minimum service level work that we're undertaking, there's a confidence level that we would achieve that sum. However, before we look at the budget bridging reserve and savings, the report sets out a set of further options which the Cabinet could follow and Council could follow. We await the November local government policy statement, but on the assumption that there are no council tax referendum limit freedoms and no changes to legislation or the flexibilities, we think the options would be to open talks with the government for exceptional finance support in the form of an above referendum limit council tax rise, and if that was not forthcoming, to consider a council tax referendum. And you will have no doubt picked up this week that the Prime Minister's spokesman set out on Wednesday, seemingly ruling out any possibility of council tax flexibility for 25-26. That's a quick canter through, Leader. I shall pause there.
Okay, thanks very much for that, Andy. The one thing, one quick question from me before we ask other colleagues to ask any questions. We should be clear about DSG for those people who might be watching and understand what it is something, it's an issue that is common to pretty much every council that looks after education or is an education authority, and that unless the government sort out the statutory override and either extend it or do something differently with it, pretty much every council in the country would be in that position were they not to resolve that.
Oh, that's absolutely correct, Leader.
So we're not alone. So before I come to you, Malcolm, do you have questions or do you want to make a contribution to debate? Okay, super. In which case, Ros, and then Steve.
Thank you, Leader. Just actually following on from the DSG that you mentioned, that is it's clearly a significant pressure for everyone locally. But I'm just wondering, and the size of our deficit, it must be having a significant impact on our cash flow. And can you just explain a bit more about that pressure that it is causing, please? Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, that's absolutely correct. It is feeding through and having an impact to cash. So in the current year, the forecast deficit to March 25 is 196 million. So that's cash out the door. The full year impact of not having that cash through 26-27 at an assumed interest rate of 5% would be about 9.8 million loss of investment income. That's partly an issue. And of course, the DSG rises, the deficit rises during 26-27 to nearly 300 million. So you get the further impact of that. But as we draw down reserves in support of the budget and cash is used for DSG, that's bringing down the overall level of cash, and it's probably bringing forward the requirement at an accelerated rate for us to need to borrow. So we'll end up borrowing sooner rather than we otherwise would without the DSG kind of deficit. So kind of double whammy of lost interest on the investment potential and potential earlier borrowing costs because of the loss of cash.
Steve.
Thank you, Leader. If I could just ask you to clarify, when we're talking about the exceptional financial report, you made reference to more flexibility on council tax, which the government at the moment is indicating isn't available. But can you confirm that we're not talking about a capitalisation direction at this moment?
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, typically EFS has been granted in the form of a capitalisation direction, but for a number of authorities who had the capitalisation direction, they also were allowed to increase their council tax above the referendum limit. So the four councils in the current year were Thurrock, Birmingham, Slough and Woking. and our conversation with government would not be about the capitalisation direction. I think as set out in the report, we don't believe there's a role for capitalisation, given that we exhausted our savings position. Therefore, the flexibility we request would be in council tax.
Supplementary.
Yeah, do.
Thank you. As you mentioned, a number of councils are in that position, and I understand many other councils which aren't, for some of them, as well run and well managed as ours, and don't have the same pressure maybe on adult social care and children and young people, are in a depressing situation, if I can use that term, and districts as well, because I'm conscious that some of these issues affect districts, and it's disappointing that the government's rescue package that you mentioned actually is far from a rescue package. It doesn't address the problems that there are and doesn't give us the flexibility. But how much capital could potentially be available to us if there was a capitalisation direction? And if there was one, how would that be sufficient to prevent the impending S114 that you alluded to?
Yeah, thank you. So I guess it will start with a conversation with government in terms of setting out what we believed our overall gap was and what the options were around closing that gap. So potentially the request could be for a full capitalisation direction to close the entire 116 million, or a combination in discussion with government of a lower number. So I guess it would be flexible in terms of that discussion with government. But if we sought the full amount, then that would close the budget gap for 25-26. But obviously would come with a borrowing cost. The borrowing cost is over 20 years. So effectively you're borrowing for 20 years to fund a 1 year budget position. And of course you then arrive at year 2, where we've got the even larger budget gap. So you then decide you address year 2. But yes, it would close if you got the full direction.
Thanks. Any other questions, colleagues? Questions from Select Committee chairs? No. So, Malcolm, do you want to go first in terms of giving us your contribution, and then I'll ask colleagues whether they wish to make any other additional comments as well.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you for letting me speak. Obviously, this is probably the biggest issue facing the council at the moment, and over the last few months, I've been trying to get my head around it all and understand it all. But I just wanted to kind of share my. This is obviously a critical issue, so I wanted to share my thoughts. So thank you. There's no getting around the fact that whilst the news in today's report is not unexpected, it comes as a blow. Nobody, not officers, councillors or residents, want to see the council rapidly depleting our financial reserves and heading towards declaration of a Section 114 notice. But at the time when it's easy to just talk about negatives, it's important to keep focus on our residents and our staff. The County Council makes a huge difference to the lives of our 1.4 million residents, whether that's through our schools, 135,000 pupils in Hampshire schools, or providing long-term care to over 20,000 residents, supporting over 11,000 children in social care and managing 3,500 hectares of land for people in nature. The Council has to address some massive financial challenges now and over the coming years, but we must ensure our residents, and particularly the most vulnerable, that rely most on the Council's support, are at the heart of any decisions. But it's not only our residents we need to think about. Council officers are at the front line of working with our communities and will need support from both the Council and from residents as we ask them to do more with less. Whilst we have to deal with the situation that we find ourselves in and need to do the best job possible in these circumstances, I am angry at the reasons for us being here. Even in the relatively short time I've been on the council, it's clear that whilst the council is not perfect and there are always opportunities to make improvements, the main issues have been caused by the government. For years, successive governments have focused on short-term gimmicks rather than long-term planning. The government sets the legal duties of councils, but then repeatedly fails to provide the funding that local authorities need to support their delivery. We have an ageing population, which means that every year more funding is needed to support adult social care, and yet no more funding is provided. In the past 10 years, the demand for children's social care has more than doubled, and yet no more funding is provided. In the past 10 years, the number of children and young people who need special support with their education and health due to learning difficulty or disability has more than doubled, and yet no more funding is provided. School transport costs, driven mainly by education, health and care plans, are skyrocketing, and yet no more funding is provided. The report includes the statement that an independent panel has confirmed that even if the council were operating with all services at a legal minimum service level, the council would not be able to balance the budget on a sustainable and recurring basis. That is a shocking statement to make, and an indictment of failure on the part of the people who have been elected to represent us. None of these issues are easy to resolve, and solutions may not be popular, so instead of addressing the issues and coming up with a feasible long-term plan, the government has delayed, prevaricated, and limited itself to short-term measures. I ask that the leader, the chief financial officer and the chief executive take a message back to government and to our elected MPs who are there to represent us in government that this is not good enough. Our residents deserve better, and we expect them to deliver. Thank you.
Malcolm, thank you. That's a really helpful statement, I have to say. And it's certainly something that you'll notice that we're writing to the government there, and there's another letter ready to go to the Chancellor asking her to once again look at those powers that we need that would revolutionise our ability to manage things ourselves. So that's helpful. Thank you. Zoe.
Thank you, Chair. We've highlighted the fact, and I just want to raise my grave concerns regarding the change of diversion of funding regarding the deprivation index. And I think it's key that we say that the government will treat us as a whole, as Hampshire, as a county. And I think we're declared as in the least deprived counties. And coming from the division that is listed as the most deprived in the county in Gosport. And we heard earlier on from the economic strategy that we had 166 neighbourhoods fall into the areas of deprivation. That's about 10% of children in the county that also come from deprived income families, which is quite stark, and we need to understand that. I know we're doing work, and I want to really highlight the fact that we need to continue that lobbying to make sure government understand our landscape here in the county and the differences we have across our neighbourhoods and the deprived areas that we have, because as we move forward, it's important that we continue to have those investments in those areas. And it's quite concerning that they are looking at us as a single whole and not actually the deprivation areas that we have within the county. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Zoe. Any other comments, Jan?
Yes, just a brief comment, and building on Malcolm commented that we are a well-run organisation and we have some of the most outstanding staff in the country. And I wanted to pay tribute. You'll notice in the recommendations reference to many down, and I just wanted to single out two people here, if I may. One is Gary Westbrook and one is Councillor Peter Latham, who have been deeply involved in this project. It outlines how councils should be flexible and innovative. And I know this is a long-term project, but it's a very, very positive narrative. So I just wanted to mention that. Thank you, Leader.
Thanks so much. Any other comments, everybody? Steve.
I'd like to just pick up on a couple of bits that were mentioned and make a couple of additional comments if I can. I mean, in terms of protecting our most vulnerable, whether they're aged, whether they're young, whether they're of whatever age or circumstance, that is something that our staff, our members, everyone involved has done the most amazing job. I think witnessed by the outstanding rating that we got from Ofsted on Children's Services once again. And as mentioned by the leader in his initial introduction, things like our school improvement service, the HIAS service, the way that is respected and the work that we're doing locally, but it's respected by other councils right the way across the country. And actually we deliver some of those services to them on a chargeable basis. So it's a revenue opportunity, is really, really encouraging. We are a well-run council. The problems that we have are, as highlighted by Malcolm, by the leader, many of the things that are forced on us by statute for instance, on school transport, which hasn't really been updated significantly since 1944. And the rules are, well, how can I put it nicely? I can't. It's a bit of a farce, really. And the costs we have here are very well controlled, but what we don't have is the flexibility that we have been requesting from government. And it is really disappointing that this government has done pretty much nothing except add extra burden with national insurance and extra costs. We have some amazing new initiatives on at the moment on things like community transport, where we're looking at using our community transport in conjunction with school transport to get more efficiency. We're looking at increased innovation, and some of our officers are spending a considerable amount of time to look at that. And there are many other initiatives. I don't want to dwell on them, but I think we're doing not just what we can, we're actually going above and beyond and really looking at exploring every opportunity. And I'd like to thank all those officers and all those members and all those staff that are involved in that. But we do need the support from government, not financial support so much as actually the flexibility that we have been requesting. And I hope the leader will, I'm sure the leader will take that on. And we all need to do that. Our MPs need to do far more than they're doing at the moment.
Thanks, Steve. Any other comments, everybody? No. Select committee chairs. Peter, would you like to say something about Manydown?
Wasn't expecting that, but thank you for your comments, Jan. As you know, we've completed the financial aspects to enable the purchase of Manydown to move forward, so that we can go into next stage will be the infrastructure, installation of the infrastructure, and the funding for that, which is in hand. So we can expect Manydown to go forward for infrastructure building, then housing within infrastructure, the start almost immediately. And beyond that, there is a time scale, so that one day the council will receive a return on that long-term investment.
Peter, thank you. And I have to say, you have worked assiduously on this for years, as has Gary, and in quite possibly, and also David, and quite possibly in one of, and Rob, and everybody, and Carolyn, everyone's worked really hard on this for a long time. But it is one of the most complex deals, and I've been around in business for quite some time. I've never seen a deal as complex as this. And the fact that you've got it over the line, and that we, number one, are delivering housing and infrastructure for the people of Basingstoke in an appropriate way, and in a way that benefits the council long term, both Basingstoke and Deane and the county council, and that we are finally there is a huge credit to all of you, and thank you for all of the work that you've done. And in my first couple of weeks as leader, you were very kind and sat down and spent a long time giving me lots of pages of notes that I took about what this is all about, and the fact that we've got it over the line is an amazing point. But I think the point for me actually that's pertinent to this as well, and pertinent to the situation in which we find ourselves, is that issue that Steve was highlighting with Andy about capitalisation. The money that we make from Manydown is using one of the assets that we have as the county council, and we should be using that money to invest in the infrastructure of the county for the future. We should be looking to the people who will live here and who will be sitting here as councillors in many years' time, to provide them with the resources to do something similar and to do that work. And the fact that we are having, as a consequence of the government's inactivity, to consider using that money to fund our day-to-day services is frankly a travesty and criminal in my view, because that is our future, and we are having to consider using the money that we have for capital projects that we raise from the various assets that we have sold and that we've used to earn money to just fund our day-to-day services, because the government won't give us the flexibilities and the independence that we need. It's important to say that we're not impotent in sitting here and waiting for this situation to come down the line at us. We are working day in, day out. And I was at a local government finance weekend a couple of weekends ago. I know how to live. And at that, they asked everybody in the room who loses sleep over their council's finances. And I think I certainly do, and I think if you don't at the moment as a leader, then you are either extraordinarily lucky or you're not paying attention, because every council is in this situation. And we are leaving no stone unturned. We are looking at our organisation, we are looking at our assets, we are looking at the ways by which we can, within the extraordinarily stringent rules in which we have to operate, ways by which we can manage matters and find money and save money and find better ways of doing things. And that is something that we will continue to do every single day until the end. And the team that sit around us here, from Carolyn and Rob through the finance teams and through all of the directorates, are working incredibly hard in incredibly difficult circumstances, whilst also in many situations also providing the absolute best care for our residents and for, as we've said, the core purpose that we have, which is to look after the most vulnerable people in most vulnerable of our neighbours, the most vulnerable of our residents in the county. And hidden within this, there is a really important piece that gives permission for us to go and look at the recruitment of further children's social workers. And in a week when the Archbishop of Canterbury has resigned over really awful and appalling situations of abuse that went on some years ago, and were not too far from us here in this county, then it is entirely appropriate that that's where we spend our money. And it is the vulnerable children of Hampshire that we prioritise, and we make sure that are looked after first, and having the requisite number of social workers to be able to support that service is vital to us. The most depressing bit of this for me is the fact that we're having to talk about raising council tax. When we have inflation at 1.7%, even a 5% council tax rise, to my mind, frankly, is too high. But we've got to do it because we can't otherwise afford it. And we've got to go and ask for even more council tax because we're not given the freedom and the flexibilities and the additional funding we need. And my fear is that the new government want to effect defund southern councils like ours. We have a strong record of sound financial management. We've had low council tax. Indeed, we've still got the lowest, second lowest council tax of any county. And what they're doing by way of their redistribution of government funding to local government is sending that money purely to bolster other councils elsewhere that quite often are failing. And Malcolm kindly referred to the independent panel that we've had come in to look at what we're doing. They have been people entirely independent, well regarded in their sectors in local government, who have come and looked at each different part of the council to make sure that we are doing absolutely everything we can. And they have said very clearly, we are a well-governed and a very well-run council. We have good relationships between us all. We do things exactly as we should. We do not waste money. We make every efficiency we possibly can. And yet we still can't live within our means because we are not given the money and the flexibility we need. And so we're left with our hands tied, and we're left with our hands tied having to talk about how we might be able to find a way to raise council tax even higher. And at a time when small businesses, at a time when farmers, at a time when pensioners are all under pressure because of the decisions of this government, for them not to do that for us is frankly negligent. So the government says it's not taxing working people, but forcing Hampshire to hike our council tax is precisely that, and they're forcing us to take a tax rise for them through the back door. And we will do absolutely everything we can to avoid that. But it is a decision that we have to ultimately make, because we, unlike the NHS and unlike the government, cannot return a budget that is not balanced. So the work continues. We will be back here in a couple of months' time to start talking about the budget once again. We hopefully will be talking about a very different situation once Rachel Reeves finally reads my letter and says, okay, that's fine, Nick. We will do all of this. I remain an optimist about it, but it's not. It's a hard thing to do still in this circumstance. Thank you for your contributions, Malcolm. Thank you for your kind words. It is something of which I'm very proud, that cross-party in this council we all recognise the challenge we face, and we are all working towards finding a solution to it. But increasingly, that window is closing on us in terms of being able to manage things without asking for support. So, colleagues, there are a range of different recommendations that are in front of you. They are all on page 85 in paragraphs 2 to 10C. To 9. There were also the recommendations to county council as well. So we're recommending lots of stuff to different people. Are you happy to approve those? Yeah. Thank you very much. So, Andy, thank you. I think you're staying now for the next bit, the Q2 financial monitoring. You're happy, aren't you? You don't want to? Yeah. Great.
Okay, again, thank you, Leader. The month 5 monitoring. So it sets out the forecast outturn position, which is a forecast overspend of 15 million, and that's after utilising all corporate contingencies. But what that figure masks is the underlying position in children's and adults, which is a collective overspend of 47 million, and that's split between children's 30 million and adults 16 million, and they really are a continuation of those demand pressures that we previously talked about on social care and home to school transport. Recognising the seriousness of that position, the Chief Exec has put in urgent spend controls across the organisation. There's a complete recruitment freeze unless the post is business critical, and similarly for all non-pay expenditure, the organisational message is to cease all non-business critical spend. So that's the in-year position. The report also covers progress on savings. So for SP23, the report sets out that programme is now substantially complete, so 98% delivered, with only £1.2 million remaining, and it recommends that we cease the formal monitoring through Cabinet and move that now for Directorate to deliver that final 1.2 million. For SP25, which you'll be very, very familiar with, you have now agreed total savings for SP25 phase 1 of 84.2 million. So I think that was a 93% delivery of the 90 set out in November last year. Of that, we anticipate in-year early delivery of savings in 24-25 of just short of 21 million, which is excellent. And in terms of the overall confidence levels, that is also set out. So nearly 20%, just over 20% delivered, 13% green, 63% on amber, and a very, very small 0.2% as red. And I shall pause there.
Super, thanks very much, Andy. So questions, colleagues. Kirsty.
Thanks for that, Andy. You mentioned the 63% identified as amber there. Is that a concern for you at this stage?
Certainly we want to make sure that we are making the appropriate progress to delivery for 26-27. It's not unusual in the lead up to the year in question for there to be amber savings, and we've recently just asked all directors to review all their savings again and to let us know if anything is not on track. But at the moment, the expectation is that all those savings will be delivered in line with that profile.
Thanks. Ros?
Thank you, Leader. My colleague kindly brought up the concerns we have about school transport earlier on in the previous item. And yeah, I think we're all aware that school transport is a huge pressure on our budget, and that isn't going away, and it's the likelihood it's going to increase very significantly in the near future. And we've talked about lots of times about legislative change and how we can go about this. What impact do you think that would actually have on our school transport if we were successful to get those changes in place, be it means testing or anything else that we can possibly do? Thank you.
Thank you. So I guess it's difficult to be specific on what impact will be without knowing what the precise changes are. But I guess just to reassure that, Stuart as a director puts in place all the controls that you would expect. Unfortunately, as you'll be aware, we get a lot of appeals, and the success rate is 92% of appeals we lose. Sorry, not success rate for us, but 92% are lost. It's clearly an issue. I think encouragingly, I think just yesterday, Stuart's received a letter from DFE seeking detailed data collection on homeschool transport. So I guess that's recognition of a need to do something. But you're right, without changing the law, our options to manage down actual demand are limited. But I guess in terms of what would the impact be, I guess it would depend on the actual measures we're allowed to introduce.
Thanks. Any other questions, everybody? No. Okay, so we have the recommendations that are on page 143 in section B, 1 to 8. Any debate? Anyone like to say anything? No. Debate it out. I think just in this section, I think it's worth just talking about why we're having overspends, and whilst we predict what we might need to spend each year, the level of support that we are asked to provide for people to whom we can not say no, and we should not say no, is ever increasing. And I think it's worth noting that every year the net number of people over the age of 80 in Hampshire increases by between 3,500 and 4,000. We have 200 requests for EHCPs every month, new EHCPs every month, and that's the thing that impacts upon special educational need transport, which is the main driver for the school transport pressures. And when you talk to colleagues from other places, sometimes they don't have quite the same pressures that we do, but then you realise that they come from much more suburban counties than we are. And as a consequence of that, they're not having to transport their children quite such long distances. And for that reason, that is why we are looking to build new SEN schools. It's why we're looking to repurpose some of our estate to be able to provide that support as well, that is much closer to people's homes and requiring much less input from their transport. And it's also why before Christmas we are going to be talking to each of the bus companies and each of the community transport providers to find much better ways, if we possibly can, of transporting our children to school as well. So those pressures are significant, and it is right that we meet them, but they come at a cost, and they come at a cost that is greater than that which we have projected. But thank you, Andy, for all the work and that everyone's been doing to keep those down. Steve.
Thank you, Leader. I just wanted to pick up on something you said and also one other element, which is in terms of the EHCPs, the number is truly staggering. Currently, we have to use educational psychologists to do much of the work on that. And that's an area we're focusing on. But I think it's important to note that Hampshire County Council actually has managed to stay on top of this in the main and really do an outstanding job in reducing the backlog and getting them done in a timely fashion, which is really important. So despite the pressure put on us by government, we are dealing with the majority reasonably well. But I also wanted to pick up on something Andy mentioned in terms of the appeals, for instance, on school transport, etc. We lose a large proportion. We're flagged as losing them, even if we win most of the issues that are appealed. and that's something that people don't appreciate. We are protecting our spend and protecting our residents. Where an appeal is made, and it maybe has 7 or 8 items on it, we generally are seeing most of those points held in our favour, judged in our favour, but we may lose a small proportion. But if we lose one of those items, officially we're seen as losing the appeal. So that number of 92% actually is falsely high, and the work that we are doing to protect our spend and make sure that we are using our funds wisely is really carefully controlled. And I think, again, our officers deserve praise for the work we're doing on that.
They do indeed. Thanks, Steve. Any other contributions, everybody? Select committee chairs? Right, all good. So in which case you've got the recommendations in front of you. Can I ask if you are happy to agree those? Yeah, super. Thank you. Andy, thanks so much. And we're on to our partnership arrangement, Simon.
Many thanks, Chair. So this is a short report set out in front of you detailing the partnership arrangements we have for public health with the Isle of Wight Council. This is to describe what we're doing and then to recommend that at the end of this current agreement we do not renew. And this is the decision that I was going to say it's the paper will be presented. It was presented last night at Isle of Wight Council and they approved that decision as well. It's fair to say we've been in this partnership since January 2018, which was interim and then went to a formal arrangement in September 2019. I'm not sure we could have quite predicted the world's pandemic at that point, which followed a few months later. Happy to take any questions on the paper.
Super, thank you. Any questions, everybody? Jan?
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Simon. And I think I know the answer to this, but we have a very integrated, joined-up care system within Hampshire. Can you give us the reassurance that the Isle of Wight will stay as part of that, and we will be joined up in our priorities around public health?
You're quite right, Councillor Warwick. We'll carry on working together. We have one integrated care system, which the Isle of Wight and most of Hampshire is part of. And there are many things that we will carry on doing together in terms of public health because it makes sense. For example, we commission our sexual health services together because people move across different geographies. And some of the priorities are the same, but I think having I carefully say it because I am definitely the Director of Public Health for Hampshire and proud of that. Having more focus for me on Hampshire enables me to do even more of that work together with our partners. I know that our Chief Executive sits on groups with other Directors of Public Health from the system and that will carry on. I'm a public health professional. I'm also a council employee. So I have those two roles all the time in some of the system and that will carry on.
Super, thanks. Any other comments, questions? Happy, Bill? Okay. Any debate? Russell, did you want to say anything about this?
I'd just like to say that, you know, we will continue to have a very good relationship with our partners on the Isle of Wight. Where there are opportunities to spread best practice, for example, I'm sure we'll continue to do that. And who knows what the future holds. You know, we will stay in touch with them and, you know, we will find ways to work with them for the good of both our sets of populations in the future.
Super, thanks so much. I know that's something that in the meeting that we had on Wednesday where the Isle of Wight were present, you know, we were touching on how they wish to continue to work with us as well. So there are still good relationships amongst us all. In which case, everyone's got the recommendation in front of them, which I need to find. So on page 165, are you happy to agree with that?
Agreed.
Super, thank you. In which case we're on to the public health strategy annual update, Simon.
Many thanks. And first, can I say thanks to Joe Jeffries, my Associate Director, who is part of writing the report, so wants to be here quite rightly. Just for clarity, as Director of Public Health, I have to do an independent report on a health topic. This is not that. This is a report on the public health strategy and the progress we have made since Cabinet signed it off in June 2023. It's really about how we've met the Council public health duties. We've set out in 3 themes, so healthy places, about evidence-based public health action for system change, healthy lives, and as we all say, that's almost what we're known for a little bit too much, so that's the lifestyle services, smoking, weight management, etc., and how we do that, and then healthy people, keeping our residents safe from health threats and some of our other duties. I'd just like to highlight 3 real successes. I think the report highlights many, but I'd just like to bring 3 to the fore, if that's okay. So in healthy places, I think the work we have really strengthened with the Hampshire 2050 Directorate on enabling healthy places to become things that enable people to be healthy is really important, and we've done more of that, thinking about our local transport plans and how we thought about cycling and walking in those, and working with things like Many Down to think about how we can plan for healthy places, working closely with our districts. In Healthy Lives, in the report, I'm really proud to see the increase we've had in number of people accessing alcohol treatment. It's been a subject that really hasn't moved forward in the last little while, but now we've seen a 21% increase in the last year due to the way we've changed our services to enable people to feel less stigmatised to access. There's much more we need to do with our NHS colleagues who really need to be able to action some of the work that they need to do when someone comes into hospital with a problem like that. And then healthy people, we've done a lot of work around vaccinations. Really proud to see, again, we've seen some people coming forward for the COVID vaccination for the first time this winter. Now, we do that in partnership with the ICBA, but we have a really good role in targeting our communications and really challenging the ICB to make sure that their programmes are fit for our residents. And then back to Councillor Huggins' point, we have a JSNA which is really well commended in the ICP, a joint strategic needs assessment that brings a lot of data together that actually helps us really focus our work and really helps our NHS to think about the needs of the population. Very happy to commend the report to you, Leader.
Super, thanks so much, Simon. So colleagues, questions? Russell.
Thanks, Leader. Firstly, I'd just like to thank you for the report. It's a really comprehensive document, and it's just great to see that the public health team is working across the council in this way, and it's exactly how it should be. My question is actually about national policy and legislation, and I'd just like to ask you, Simon, what do you see on the horizon in the national policy setting that will help or hinder our ability to deliver the public health strategy?
We're seeing going through Parliament at the minute some of the smoking legislation, which I think is really exciting from a public health perspective. I don't know if you're aware, colleagues, when the ban came in for smoking in workplaces, actually we saw heart attacks drop within 6 weeks. And I sometimes think our NHS colleagues don't recognise the impact some of these policies can have. So really excited to think about what that looks like locally so that we can implement that. I think we're beginning to see some work on the kind of high fats, high sugar, the high processed food, which does impact on health. And what we can do is support those locally and see how we can improve health in that space. And again, on the alcohol front, we're seeing some work there, and we're continuing to look at where that funding comes from government to carry on doing the good work locally.
So, come back? Yeah.
I mean, and just following on from that, we've been hearing from the government that prevention will be a key theme of their NHS plan. Presumably that's good news for us in public health, because they're going to fund more initiatives to keep people healthy before they get sick. Is that your feeling about it? And will we be feeding into that NHS plan over the next few months?
Yes, that is exciting. I think we need to recognise that in 2013, when public health transferred across from the NHS, we are the public health authority. We have that duty, and you have the expertise in your teams here. So you're right, Councillor Oppenheimer. It is exciting. We need to carry on the messages that I have said for many years, but I think it gives us even more impetus to make sure that our colleagues in the NHS really step up and carry on doing prevention even better than they have done in the past.
Super, thanks. Any other questions, everybody? No? Yes, Juliet.
Thank you, Simon, and thank you for mentioning Manydown. I think this is an area we have to really focus on when we look at public health, as green spaces, good cycling, good walking routes. So I'm really glad you mentioned that, because I'm sure that's an integral part of our public health programme, is making sure the countryside and green spaces are accessible and people can walk and cycle easily and regularly.
Absolutely, I completely support that. Also need to recognise that some people find it harder to access, so what do we do there? We've done some things like bikeability, because we know some people don't get on a bike. So actually, what's that about? So how do we focus on those people and populations most at need of improving their health?
Thanks. Bill, do you want to add anything?
Thank you, Leader. No, I'd just like to support the report and the great work that Simon and his staff are doing, and the impact it's actually having on the ground. A lot more primary care networks now are doing blood pressure testing and heart testing outside our major stores, and that's where you're going to capture most of the residents. So when you look at the Health and Wellbeing Board, HASC, and the other boards here, the word is getting out on the ground, and that's where we need it to get out. So an excellent report, and well done to all the staff.
If I'm allowed to cheekily respond, it's really, we now through our libraries lend blood pressure monitors, because actually we saw that Councillor Fairhurst went and did a video down there, because actually we want health to be accessible, and our libraries are a brilliant place to do that. So it's great that we can start to do more of that.
Indeed, and I was going to bring up the Liz video, and as we transform our libraries into community hubs, it's exactly the kind of thing that we need to be doing in them, so that they become a centre of for the community to enhance their healthcare and to access support and to do many other things than just go and look at what books there might be available. Okay, any other comments, everybody? Zoe?
Yeah, if I may, Chair, is just to draw attention to your comments on, or the report of page 174, and some additional good work that we're doing that obviously cross-cuts this, so your healthy places. So I chair the Climate Change Expert Forum, and they've had a commissioned inquiry to look at healthy places. So under our 2050 partnership, we are the year of health and wellbeing. And I'm really pleased to say that obviously we're looking at healthy places and the impact in particular on physical activity, childhood obesity and mental health. So it's really good within that strategy that we're seeing that healthy places and the impact on our environment within that. I think our Nature Recovery is also looking at that inquiry.
Super. Everyone finished? Yep. Okay, in which case you have the recommendations in front of you on page 171 and section 2A and B. Are you happy to agree those? Okay, Simon, thank you so much. So now it's Jess's turn for the Adults Health and Care Directorate 5-year strategy refresh.
Thank you, Leader and Cabinet. I want to report on the progress made by Adults Health and Care to deliver its vision and 5-year strategic plan 1 year on. I'd like Cabinet to note the good performance despite the challenging context, in particular increased demand from Hampshire's ageing population and the increasing complexity of young adults, leading to financial challenge and a recurring budget gap. But Adults Health and Care are not alone in that. The NHS are also facing financial pressures in Hampshire, and whilst the care sector is relatively stable right now, there remain workforce and financial pressures with further impacts from the autumn statement. And these wider aspects also exacerbate the squeeze on adults' health and care finances. Despite this, the Directorate have engaged communities, pursued strong partnerships and worked creatively to seek to address these issues as much as possible and where we can. At the heart of the strategy is maximising independence and well-being to prevent the need for formal services. And progress includes a new joint carers strategy. Carers and supporting them is so important to us, not only because it is the right thing to do, of course, but that it prevents the need for excessive care and support and enables people to stay at home with loved ones, maximising independence to support our savings programmes. And Hampshire Adults Health and Care remain at the leading edge of technology with pilots to use technology to support independence as well as to improve the productivity of our workforce. It's also important to note the learning from Safeguarding Adults reviews, which has led to an enhanced support worker programme to support people who self-neglect and hoard, who are at risk. Also, a risk escalation framework to ensure that staff are supported with complex risk situations, of which there are growing trends in that area, and a fire risk framework related to safeguarding, which is saving lives and is recognised as an exemplar across the region. A new care home framework, which has enabled the council to shape the residential and nursing market, and a new Help to Live at Home framework to do similarly with our domiciliary care and supporting people to stay at home. We've worked hard on delivering short-term services to aid hospital discharge and prevent hospital admission. The council made a decision to make capital investment in Hampshire County Council care and support services to make them more efficient and fit for the future. And there's been good progress continuing on the development of supported living and extra care models, which again enhances independence and enables us to support people to stay out of residential care and nursing care wherever possible. There's also been the introduction of a new case management system called Care Director, which has improved productivity for our workforce. And work has continued on preparation for the Care Quality Commission assessment and rating of adult services directorates, given their new powers in this area. The strategy has 3 strands: prevention, so centred on targeting reduction in demand for formal care services; independent living at home, supporting people with emerging care needs to live independently in their own homes for as long as possible; and lastly, accommodation, providing and maintaining good care and support for people with the greatest needs. I would draw Cabinet's attention to the superb case studies in the report in each of these areas. Our priorities going forward are listed on page 206 and include a demand management strategy to support us further in addressing our financial challenges in concert with our savings programmes, continuing to improve experiences for unpaid carers, maximising the use of technology even further, and supporting the delivery of the public health strategy. So in conclusion, the report evidences that despite a very challenging operating context, the Adults Health and Care Directorate's good performance continues and its approach to co-production and engagement remains central, alongside relentless focus on maximising independence, continuous improvement, leadership and innovation. Thank you.
Jess, thanks so much. Team, any questions? Kirsty?
Thank you, Leader. Thank you, Jess, for that excellent update. You just mentioned unpaid carers there, and I note that we have over 111,000 in Hampshire. What more can we do to support them? Because I see that they are really likely to suffer poor health.
Thank you very much. I'm pleased to say that we very recently re-procured a service provided by the voluntary sector to support carers across the county through the Princess Royal Trust for Carers. And that service will provide information and advice to carers, provide direct one-to-one support, and also more in-depth help where required. And that service absolutely provide support for that group of people that we wouldn't necessarily see in formal services. And I think the justification for that in financial terms is it absolutely prevents the need for people needing to move into 24-hour care. So I think that's really positive. We're probably 4 months into that contract now. I see that potential for that to grow, as well as attracting additional funding for something called the Accelerating Reform Fund, which is a national fund that we are part of alongside colleagues in Southampton, which will also support carers through increasing funding through that grant to support the same group of people to provide carers assessments more quickly for that group. And the other thing I think that we still have the opportunity to maximise is the new joint carers strategy that we developed in co-production with those carers. So talking to carers about what makes a difference. We've just done an exercise, for example, on improving information and advice for them in Hampshire, including a carers need checker. So absolutely, lots of progress over the last year, but lots more that we are planning to do going forward. Thank you.
That's great, thanks. Can I ask a supplementary?
Yeah, of course you can.
Thank you. You mentioned the first strand of what we can do and the contract, and I know we're only 4 months in, but are you sure that we're capturing all of the 111,000 people? You know, are they all aware of it, and what more can we do to promote it to them? So giving it an airing today is a good example.
What I discovered during COVID, actually, when the council was seeking to reach out to the wide group of carers, that 110,000, is that the voluntary sector are in a really strong position, a stronger position than us to have the connections in the local places where they are based, to be able to know and talk to groups of people that we wouldn't necessarily come across in the council. So I think it's absolutely right that function sits in the voluntary sector, and I believe that's working well. We have a really well developed carers voluntary sector within Hampshire, I'm proud to say.
Thanks. Jan?
Yeah, thank you, Leader, and thank you, Jess, for a really thorough paper. There's a really nice paragraph around paragraph 70 around priority areas for the future for the forthcoming year. And there's a strand that runs through it around AI and technology. And not all of us understand what that is and what it can do, but I know we've been at the forefront of that. What offer is there around AI and technology, and is it on the time frame that matches with our challenges, if you like? So if you could expand a bit on what we're doing and how we're paying for that. Thank you.
Of course. So I think there are two aspects to the use of technologies. There's the one that faces residents. So what you might recognise as being called telecare or telehealth, but and we've been doing, I know Councillor Warwick, you're aware of this, we've been trialling the use of technology with people with learning disabilities like autonomy, and there is something called Vocala, for example, which is a way where if somebody doesn't really need face-to-face support but needs to be checked in on, there's a way of using Alexa and other virtual technology to support people and have access to somebody to talk to without them needing to be in situ with them. Now that needs to be used carefully, but it's those kind of things that we are trialling on a small scale in safe environments and then building on that. And because we started early in adults health and care with regard to our partnership with Argenti many years ago now, I think we're in a really good place and are building on that great those great examples. Another area is, for example, how we provide night support, and that's a big area in some homes, how we safely might do more of that in a virtual way where appropriate. When you then think about the workforce, we're just embarking on a trial around using AI to support those kind of more repetitive recording tasks and how that might work. Now, we need, of course, to take account of all the things that keeps people's information safe, but at the same time, other local authorities have been trialling that, and we're moving to do that very shortly. So I think, and also another area that we're looking at is our front door and how we might support people to use, for example, more technology, and encourage residents to perhaps transact more online where there are transactional processes and forms, just to make sure that we're getting that balance right, and that people will still have access to talking to people when they need to, but otherwise making sure that they can transact in the same way as you or I would do when we're making an online purchase, for example. So those are the kind of pieces of work that we're moving ahead with confidently but carefully, and I think we'll be seeing progress on that in the next year.
Thank you so much. May I ask a brief follow-up? So presumably we share best practice, so across the whole adult care spectrum, where there is innovation, people are sharing that amongst others, and I guess that plays back to the CQC inspections. I suspect you're learning a lot from that process as well.
Absolutely. There are so many different networks and forums that myself and senior staff are involved in, that means that we can take ideas from other local authorities. So, for example, with the use of AI and that trial with recording using AI, why I feel confident about it is I know that is being trialled in other local authorities, in other adults and health and care directorates, because of that great network that we have. So absolutely learning from other local authorities who are embarking on similar journeys.
Thanks so much. Jess, any other questions, everybody? Bill, anything from you?
I'd just like to say, what an excellent report, but I'd also like to mention the Hampshire Learning Disability Partnership that we have, and the amazing work that the staff do with not only the carers, the complex need carers, but also the self-advocates. There's been a lot of changes in society. We talk about living at home independently, but the change of the banking system, here at County, work was done to enable to actually teach the members of the partnership where their local travelling bank was, all the sort of things in day-to-day life that are changing. The staff here have been excellent in supporting the individuals on the ground. Accessibility, not only in the home, but little things like higher pavements for getting in the taxi for people in wheelchairs, at bus stations, at railway stations. All these sort of discussions are helping those people to stay living independently. Which is very important. So it's a constant change.
Thank you, Councillor. I absolutely agree with you. One of our many thriving co-production groups, and agree with you with regard to all the exciting things happening there.
Super, thanks very much. Any other comments, everybody? Liz?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'd just like to say thank you, Jess, for this report again. But I'd like to highlight the difference we have made to people's lives in terms of supporting living with younger adults with disabilities. They used to be kept. I remember visiting a house once where there was 4 young ladies who'd been brought out they'd been living in residential care for goodness knows how many years, and they moved into a house together with care. But for the first time in their life, they had choice. They could choose what they were going to eat. They could choose what their rooms were decorated. They'd never had that before. And it was absolutely fantastic. It's been a programme of ours for about 10, 12 years now. But again, the difference it makes to older people who've been living in isolation with care needs, and they feel very cut off, they move into extra care, they become part of a community, and life suddenly becomes good again. And, I hope we carry on doing that. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And I absolutely agree with you. I think the word independence also brings with it that aspect of choice and control. So often you're improving outcomes, but also reducing the cost of formal care and support at the same time. So it's really, really helpful.
I think one of the things that we saw at the CCN conference last week was the launch of their report into working age adults with living with disabilities, and what was really clear there was the really strong message from people in that cohort of how they wanted to live normal lives and they wanted to contribute in the normal way. And it's been something that we've been able to already talk about, and how we interact with them around skills and training. And it comes almost to that deprivation piece about helping them obtain with their accessibility, with the accessibility of transport, with the accessibility of all sorts of opportunities for them to enable them to just play a normal part, have a normal part and a normal existence in our community. And in doing so, it has so many positive outcomes for them and us.
Yes, absolutely. And I think one of the reports describes gloriously ordinary lives. And I think that's a great description. And of course, the history of people with learning disabilities particularly is that they were not that long ago subject to stay in long stay hospital through an accident of history, really. So that progress is keenly felt, I think, particularly for that cohort of people.
Super. Jess, thanks so much to you and to the team for all the work that you're doing. Any final questions, comments, everybody? No? So the recommendations we're looking at are on page 187 in paragraph 2. Are you happy to agree those? Yeah, super. Thanks so much. So we're going on to the annual corporate risk management report, which is Steph.
Thank you, Leader and Cabinet. I'm not sure I can follow that act, but I will do my best. So this is the annual report to Cabinet in relation to the County Council's approach to risk management. And it's important because it forms part of our overall performance assurance framework. The report provides us with an overview of the changes we're proposing to make to our risk management strategy, an interim approach for your consideration, which includes, for the first time, introduction of some new risk appetite statements. The report also talks about the continued progress across the County Council in terms of strengthening our risk management framework and approach. And obviously that's a really important piece of work to provide that foundation across all of the important work that the County Council does. It talks to the changes we have recently made to bring together all of our core risk and resilience enabling functions. So essentially our corporate risk function, health and safety, emergency planning and resilience, and information governance into a single organisational service within People and Organisation Directorate led by a head of organisational resilience. And this will be really vital to ensure that we have the leadership capacity to further strengthen assurance, compliance and enforcement of our risk functions, policies, procedures and controls across the broader County Council. A key focus of this report is the interim review completed of our strategy and the work undertaken this year with our Chief Officers Group and the corporate management team to develop a set of 15 new risk appetite statements which are proposed to be incorporated within the strategy. In considering those statements, we have looked at where those key risk areas are for us as an organisation, where we need to pay attention to, and includes things such as financial. We've heard a lot about the financial risks, obviously, that we face today, but also reputational, service risks, etc. And against each of those categories, we've determined a risk appetite level. Together, those statements provide us with one single framework, which is intended to inform and contribute towards the decision-making processes of the County Council. So in part of developing those risk appetite statements, I thought it was important just to note that we have consulted with the, well, not consulted, we've discussed those with the Audit Committee for their feedback, and that has actually helped to inform and shape the very final proposals that are shared with you today for decision. And then finally, the report just touches on, again, the way in which we're using our corporate and directorate risk registers. We have our separate paper on the corporate strategic risk register a little later, but to how we use those to capture our organisational risks and ensure that we're managing and mitigating those, as well as the broader work we will be continuing to progress to build and strengthen our overall approach to risk. So thank you, Leader. Happy to take any questions.
Super. Thanks very much for that. So any questions for Steph, Zoe?
Thank you. As we're looking to sort of mature our risk appetite and the framework and sort of one system, one organisation during challenging times, which we've already heard, but I also want to say we've also heard lots about innovation and successful strategy. We do need to enable, I suppose, a change in approach and culture. So Steph, what is it that we're looking to expect from this risk appetite management system, but in particular the opportunities? You've talked about what we focus on and audit and governance, but what are the opportunities that it might bring?
Thank you. So yes, absolutely. For the first time, we have these statements, and we've given an awful lot of careful consideration in developing those. And it very is about getting that balance of risks and opportunities in terms of how we approach our decisions, so that we are taking calculated risks where we can continue to innovate and improve services as well, whilst avoiding the unnecessary exposure to risk. So they're designed as a tool that will be very flexible to help guide decision making. Often some of those will be in conflict with each other, in fact. But it's about challenging us in how we're thinking and providing that structure behind how we're thinking, so that we aren't just taking a very adverse approach all the time in terms of risk. It's recognising where those opportunities are. So one of them you will notice was around ensuring that we had an eager appetite towards looking at commercial opportunities. That's not to say we will take then decisions in that way. We will be very cautious in how we then take those decisions or reverse, but it's about prompting us to think differently.
Thanks. Any other questions, everybody? No? All good? Russell might have a question.
Thanks for the report. Can I just ask about the Organisational Resilience Service and what role that will play in strengthening corporate risk management, Steph?
Absolutely. I can't emphasise enough how important this new service will be in terms of strengthening our organisational approach to risk management, but also ensuring we can be as resilient as we possibly can to face the challenges of the future. I mentioned earlier it brings together 4 of our core risk enabling functions, risk and resilience enabling functions under one single leadership. And that is deliberate to make sure that we have a very holistic, coordinated approach to the work we do in those areas. There's lots of synergies and opportunities to work together in those spaces, but also to give that individual the opportunity to have that more greater oversight of the risk profile of the organisation and to advise and input into the thinking, strategic thinking of the organisation. So also by ensuring we have that together as one service, it can provide us with a greater degree of subject matter expertise and advice, and ultimately provide greater assurance, particularly to our corporate management team and yourselves, around how the County Council as a whole is complying with our risk and resilience policies and procedures, and that we better understand as an organisation the assurance. So we have a lot of risk, we have lots of controls. It's really important that we have a sound understanding of assurance around those working effectively. And also, I think it will be very key in driving forward that resilient organisational risk culture that we need to implement, so that we can, as one organisation, continue to adapt and continuously improve.
Steph, thanks so much. Any other questions or comments, everybody? No. Select committee chairs happy? Okay. Steph, thank you so much for all the work that you've done on this. You and the entire team. It's certainly something that Cabinet with which Cabinet have been engaged, and as we move towards being, a lean and agile council, we wanted to look specifically, and we began this process a few months ago to say, well, let's look at our appetite for risk, and how are we going to go forward, and how can we use that sense check to make sure that we're doing absolutely the best thing we can, pushing the boundaries to improve the financial position as much as we possibly can. And there's been a great deal of work carried out around it, and we've also welcomed all of the support that we've had around how that looks and what our resilience looks like. And we should welcome Stuart, who is the new head of organisational resilience. So welcome, Stuart. I promise you that Cabinet meetings don't normally go on this long. So they're generally a little bit shorter than this one. Colleagues, you've got the recommendations on pages 221 and 222. They run from paragraphs 3 to 7. Are you happy to agree those? Yep. Super. In which case, Steph, thank you so much. We've got one more thing to consider, but that's something that is something we deem to be exempt. So let me read this to you. I need to resolve that the public be excluded from the meeting during the following item of business, as it is likely, in view of the nature of the business to be transacted or the nature of the proceedings, that if members of the public were present during this item, there would be disclosure to them of exempt information within paragraphs 3 of Part 1 of Schedule 12A to the Local Government Act 1972. And further, that in all the circumstances of the case, the public interest in maintaining the exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information, for the reasons set out in the exempt report. The intention to hold part of this Cabinet meeting in private was notified on the County Council's website on the 17th of October, in accordance with Part 3, Chapter 4 of the Constitution, and no representations regarding this intention have been received. That means that Peter can go and we can stop the recording, if that's okay.